Hello everyone and welcome back to Alpine Odyssey. We get to try to work beyond the ticket booth today and start laying out some rough plans and ideas for the following episodes. Probably 10 or so episodes if you think about the rate in which we actually get things done in this park. But what we're doing is we're trying to change the height level real quick, and as you move into the ticket booth area, everything out there is really flat, and I figured it would be pretty cool to just simply go up a quick 3-4 meter as soon as you go in, and you are greeted with these left and right wide plaza areas, which will eventually furnish and make it look like there are seating areas or places where you could enjoy some food from the local shops that will be lining the main street here. So beyond these ramps and the handicap access, because currently the only way up are these staircases to the left, right, and center. And I know you guys have been asking me to add handicap areas to, say, the parking lot, and so I had to take that into account with everything going forward. So everything needs to either have an access ramp or some sort of handicap access so that this whole park can make some sense, even though I'm surely doing many things wrong at this point. So we have this red brick trim going around this dark cobblestone, and this is just for contrast reasons. A nice tan colored ramp, keep it kind of neutral and definitely a different color than most things in the area. It actually generally matches the flower boxes that we've been using in the parking lot, and it will be also the same kind of flower box color for just generally around all these structures. For now, just trying to decide on what type of floor I want to use for these large open areas right now. Thought about using brick, and brick is pretty cool, and I'm thinking about maybe doing that a little bit later, but for now, we're just going to do a smooth kind of concrete texture here, and we do alternate these a little bit. And they do create some vertical lines and somewhat of a minor pattern here and there, which does end up looking pretty cool in the long run. A lot of this isn't really pre-planned, and a lot of this were many kind of trial and error things, because really when it comes down to Alpine Odyssey, beyond the parking lot, I had no real idea in my head on what I was really building. So a lot of these things are being winged and thrown together as we go. So we're basically exploring the tiles and the theme together. And what you're seeing now is some test tiles, and eventually will be the tiles for the first building of the main street. At first I figured we should go a little bit fancier, but the more I thought about it, we might want to build that up a little bit more throughout the build. But we're just testing out some possible castle stonework, just because we are within the park now, so we can possibly up the stonework quality, and it also changes the variation in the building just slightly enough, so not everything's the same. I tried some keystone kind of corner pieces possible, and this is just so we can just try and keep the buildings varied. I feel like that's probably my weakest point in Planet Coaster, is that I kind of establish a theme and then I build 20 buildings in the exact same style and format. So it's really good to try and push the theme as far as possible. I end up not doing that so much here, but you will see some, well, or at least hopefully some cool building details down the line. I'm trying to work in some brick detail and some other things, possible ruined sections, which is pretty interesting. I don't see many people do this often, and what I've noticed with a lot of these really old European towns and areas like this, where it's kind of this brickwork and then plaster over it to make it look smooth, they have these patches sometimes on certain areas and buildings that either took some damage or just they haven't repaired the outer coat in a little while. So that's what we're doing here. So we're just making some different background tiles to use to put behind anything else that could be in front of it. So what could be in front of this is, wood timber frames. What could be in front of this could be the stone that was originally there a bit ago. Didn't end up liking it, so we removed that, and we are just making these as generic as possible so that they can be used in as many places as possible. And when you're making things that have a distinct pattern like that, it's definitely good to have a lot of variation in them. So we'll add more as the tile set in the background obviously keeps growing, and once we hit the 4,000 park count limit, I'll upload that tile set to the workshop. You guys will be able to use that in your own parks, and etc. and etc. The cycle continues. At this point, we're making the one building in today's episode, and this is somewhat of it starts out as a gray box building, very similar to everything else that I've kind of done so far. Gray boxing for me is just kind of a great way to jumpstart my creativity a little bit and to test things without having to worry about deleting a whole bunch of parts at once. And this is in a very similar format in terms of detailing that the front ticket areas are, and the left right wings are going to have that format. And then as we hit the main street proper, we're going to be upgrading that and possibly going for more civic looking buildings rather than these Tudor style home looking buildings. And hopefully that will mesh together and we'll get the first view of the coaster eventually. And there's just so much stuff to build. Even on the back side of this building, you notice that big gray box, and that's actually going to end up being the backstage for this area, or at least part of it. And that's a whole nother element that we're gonna have to start considering over time. And I really want to try and capture each area in sections so that we just see it slowly grow outwards. But for now, the gray box is done, and so we just basically had to recreate it using a tile set. I'm changing the tile set again a little bit just to fit something a little bit new, add some newer, slightly updated, sections that are going to make this building just that hint different than a lot of things. We're going to add these bay windows to the front. Now, the main theming for this first structure, this is going to be the first, it has a drink stall inside, it has a fry shop inside, and it has a restroom inside. It is going to be kind of this French-ish style cafe, bakery, and that is what we're going to be doing here. So these double bay windows is pretty cool, and again, Kiki's delivery service, I think, is kind of what I was referencing a little bit here. Now, I'm not making an exact copy. One, I've already done that before. Two, I'm just taking inspiration a little bit. And what we're going to do is build this building right beside the gray box. This is just so I don't have to delete parts constantly as I slowly build this thing out. And also, I can make things, change things on the fly without having to lose that initial blueprint as we go as well. So this is kind of a little bit of a change on how I originally made my tutorial on gray boxing and how I build like that. But I think this is just one of those things where even I'm still learning little tricks to at least work in my most comfortable way. I know a lot of people who will actually be able to start building something and then just make a tile set kind of as they go and just copy bits around. I'm more of an upfront kind of guy, and that's just why we're doing it like this. You can see I'm editing that overhang instead of a 4-meter overhang and having those heavy supports out front, which kind of block the view a little too much. I'm just doing a 2-meter overhang. And, overhangs, porches, the balcony-like elements that you can add to any building is going to just definitely help flesh out that shape and make it look a little less boxy. We are using definitely box tiles, square walls, not a whole lot of angular walls onto them, but adding different layers definitely helps with that overall. And now we get to add the additional little plaza to the left and front of this building. And this is just its own private kind of sidewalk, but also its own private plaza for just the people who are eating here. The plazas kind of just right behind the ticket booth areas. Those are more common space plazas and more for people who don't even really need to be eating. Those are just open to be used. This one's a little bit more sealed off. And of course, we need to have an open door so people can come inside and outside through this archway that we're kind of making out of windows, and the front and the back of one door to make it look actually properly double-sided, and people will walk through into the building. This is something that I want to do, or try to do, for most buildings. Now, some buildings are just going to be facades, but any building that's going to have a facility inside of it, I want to try and make it have an interior. So that's going to really increase the amount of time it takes to make a building for two reasons. One, you're essentially building two buildings in one because you have to do the exterior and interior at the exact same time. Two, it's more challenging to have an interior because you have to really be mindful of those pieces kind of sticking through the walls and keep that to a minimum. And that also kind of limits the amount of detail you can do. You can't do this crazy amount of detail. If you've seen a lot of the buildings on the inside that I've shown over the year or so, it just looks like a toothy maw that is going to eat your soul. So that is, the main reason that these things take a lot of time. But to me, it's totally worth it. Whenever I try and make a park, I try and make the buildings actually interactable, because to me, it just helps sell the whole atmosphere of being somewhere and having these things be more than just set pieces in general. I know a lot of people don't have time, but it's worth a challenge sometimes to do something like this. We're gonna recolor the roof tiles to a nice red, which will definitely pop out from a distance, which is pretty cool. And this roof tile is also going to end up having a little bit of custom stitch work to be done. And this is pretty normal with my tile sets, especially the roofing, but it's still pretty quick here at this point. Just need to make sure these wider full length planks are at least lined up and look decent from a distance. We are switching to plaster just on the upper level there. There's no windows up there, and it's a relatively plain building if you think about it, but I'm okay with it. We're still just trying to build up space and make sure everything is going to be working well. We have a new custom roof that needs to be built. This is a 45-degree angle going to a 60-degree angle roof line, and so we need to make sure the tile set is going to work. So obviously, copy and paste, hodgepodge, everything that we previously made together, and you can make something new relatively quickly at this point. This is kind of why you want to keep old pieces around. If I had to hand lay these roof tiles again, it would have just drastically added to the time, and that's not something I want to have you guys sit through too often. And at this point, we can just simply slap it onto the building. There's still some bits and bobs missing, especially atop the upper spine of the roof, but easy enough to quickly just slap on that detail. Now, the colors, I know they are kind of plain, but the reference materials that I use, I think I'm using Rothenberg a little bit here lately, and you'll notice a lot of the buildings are kind of just plain plaster. In fact, they don't even have a crazy amount of timber framing going on, and it's kind of interesting to me because I don't really know European architecture a whole lot. So I have to kind of fight my urge to add a crazy amount of detail because there just kind of wouldn't be. But again, it kind of depends on the building and what that building's going to be used for. When we get to the more civic looking buildings, we'll probably turn up the detail a little bit. But on these initial just small restaurants and small stores, vendors that are just lining the street, not so much, because you don't want to have everything at a crazy level. You kind of want to have spots where people can kind of rest their eyes a little bit, take in, and plus, if everything is detailed, your detail structures actually look a little less impressive because they're kind of competing for that visual space. So that's something to keep in mind. We'll add some gardens and things like that, and I'll do some off-camera work just to make sure the plaza is kind of a little bit more fleshed in general. We're going to skip the interior on this episode. I might try and cover that next episode on the first part, but of course that is something we're just going to have to do over time. It takes a decent amount of time to, one, come up with a new building, two, make a symmetrical, but it's mirrored in a different way, so I can't use copy and paste quite effectively on these things. And there's just a lot of hand placing of items, which is perfectly fine, but sometimes you have to just finish what you can and then get an episode out so that you guys have some content for the next few days. And of course, we're going to be live streaming on Sunday, so I hope you guys are excited for that. I am, and we'll hopefully at the live section get to see a little bit of stuff that I have plans for the future, and maybe we'll talk about what we might work on Sunday as well. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to real time. You guys will then of course give me your wonderful feedback, your likes, dislikes, etc., and I will see you there. So here we are, year 50 in Alpine Odyssey. You can see that we have a nice little view of this somewhat bakery food stall, kind of just to the left, upper left of the initial Main Street area. We got some tables and chairs, which I've kind of built off camera, and these little details is really what kind of sells the space. Now there is a problem, of course. These guys are going to be clipping through these elements, and I could spend time, add trash cans to like the base of these. However, I think that would just take away from the furniture look completely, so I don't want to really do that in this case. We're just going to let them clip through, because eventually the people will spread out through the park and it'll be a little less noticeable in general. But they aren't really clipping too much through this doorway to get inside, which is good. I do want to show you the kind of cast iron backings to a lot of these chairs. I really wanted it to be a light looking chair with a heavy looking table, and we'll add some variations as we go. This is kind of the more European version, you could say. Maybe a little French if you think about it. In here we have just the food stalls, again not decorated just yet, but I want to have a nice kind of bar here, more like a serving counter, a menu. We need to have tables and chairs on the interior as well. We need to have display stalls, maybe a little bit for some fresh bread. Who knows? It's kind of supposed to look like a bakery, so we'll see what we can do on the inside. By the way, using trash cans to kind of help funnel people through here so they don't clip through the door quite as much. On the outside, we have some benches just lining these nice brick sidewalks, which are lovely. And then we have some greenery around the plazas at this point. So as things progress, a lot of this area is going to be filled in with greenery, because that's a great way to kind of blend areas together, and it helps kind of cover some ugly spots. But also we'll eventually add some more stalls, more miscellaneous things. These plazas, I'm thinking about adding some sort of food cart of some kind. It's not going to be functional, but it'll look cool. I know everyone's going to say get an ice cream truck in there, but I don't think I'm going to really do that. That might be a little much. But over here, we have the nice little side plaza with some more tables and chairs, and these are just nice area fillers in general. At the back, right now I just have a box representing the backstage area. The backstage area will become more important as we continue. At first, I need to establish kind of the main street and the sightlines of the park, and then we'll attach a backstage area kind of slapped onto it, because that's less important. I mean, it's still super important, but it's less so than actually getting the park looking good. But this is kind of the first area, and then as we get these buildings along the main streets on both sides, we'll add these little white boxes to kind of represent extra office space, extra storage spaces, and other things like that. And the nice thing about adding this on here, the park goers are only going to see this. This is really all they're going to see. They're not even really going to see this side of the building, because there's going to be a building right here anyways. But that white box area is actually back here. It extends the interior some more, so we have some more space to work with, which is good. And by the way, this is why you want to keep the park clipping down. The roof does look cool, but doing an interior up on the second floor would be nigh impossible, I don't think. Other than that, I will say that we have another table variant that I'm working on. This is a round one with somewhat of an umbrella, and it's going to hopefully be sitting out here in this plaza with some more tables and chairs, and that'll also bring in some covered elements as well. If you guys have enjoyed this episode of Planet Coaster, feel free to subscribe to my channel for more creative goodness. Also, feel free to leave a comment on how you think everything looks, if you have any ideas and suggestions for things to build as we go through this wonderfully long series. Also, go ahead and watch my other videos if you haven't done so already. And until then, I will see you guys in the next episode of Alpine Odyssey.